The slap echoed through the precinct's marble-lined lobby like a thunderclap. Dozens of uniforms froze mid-stride, pens stopped scratching, phones hung silent in the air. A single drop of coffee fell from Officer Torres's trembling hand and splattered against the tile, the sound somehow louder than the chatter that had filled the room a second earlier. Across from him stood Sarah Johnson, her dark skin glowing under the harsh fluorescent light, her tailored gray suit marked by a smear of spilled coffee and now the crimson print of his palm on her cheek. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't even touch the mark. Her eyes, steady, unblinking, met his with a calm that chilled the air around them. "Get out of my station," Torres hissed, voice sharp with contempt. "People like you don't belong here." A murmur rippled through the watching officers. Some smirked, some looked away. Sarah's voice came low, level, and unbroken. "I need to speak with the mayor." Torres laughed, a deep mocking sound that bounced off the concrete walls. "The mayor? Lady, the mayor doesn't meet with—" He paused, letting the insult hang unspoken, a sneer doing the work his words didn't. He turned toward the guards by the metal detector. "Security, show her out." Two guards stepped forward, hands resting on their batons. Sarah raised one hand slowly, not in fear but in command. "Officer Torres," she said, her tone suddenly edged with authority, "stand down." That only made him laugh harder. "You giving orders now?" He leaned in close, coffee-stained breath thick between them. "You're lucky I don't charge you for trespassing." The room waited for her to back away. She didn't. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and produced a sealed envelope embossed with the Golden City seal. "Read it," she said. Torres snatched it from her fingers and tore it open with exaggerated impatience. His eyes skimmed the page, and for a fraction of a second his expression faltered. Then he crushed the paper in his fist and ripped it clean down the middle. "Nice forgery," he muttered, tossing the shreds to the floor. "Now get out." From the corner, Officer Amy Parker, newer, quieter, and visibly shaken, watched every move. Her phone, half hidden by her clipboard, had already started recording. Sarah didn't move. "That was an official appointment letter," she said evenly. "You just destroyed government property." Torres snorted. Sure. What's next? You gonna arrest me?" A voice from the stairwell cut through the tension. "Actually," it said, firm and resonant, "she could." Every head turned. Descending the steps was Mayor Richardson, flanked by two city council members. The chatter died instantly. Officers straightened, shoes snapping together. Torres's bravado drained from his face like color from paper. "Mayor Richardson," he stammered. "Sir, this woman, she was causing a disturbance. Claims she's, Chief Johnson." The mayor's gaze swept the silent room. "I see you've already met some of your team," he said. The silence deepened until you could hear the fluorescent lights buzz. Sarah turned her head slightly, that same eerie calm never leaving her face. "No need to apologize, Mayor. This has been enlightening." Torres took a step back, his knees trembling. "Sir, I didn't know. Nobody told me." The mayor's eyes were like winter glass. Apparently not. The station's security camera blinked its red recording light. The mayor's words rang clear. "This is Police Chief Sarah Johnson, your new commanding officer." Torres's jaw fell open. His knees hit the floor with a crack. He tried to speak, but only a strangled plea came out. "Chief, please." Sarah brushed a scrap of torn paper from her sleeve and looked down at him, her voice calm and cold. "Stand up, officer, or you're embarrassing yourself." He couldn't. The weight of 20 years of unchecked arrogance pinned him to the tiles. Around them, officers began to whisper, the new chief, the woman he'd slapped, the one he'd called trash, and somewhere above that blinking red light, steady, unblinking, captured it all. But Sarah's expression was unreadable, because beneath that calm exterior she already knew. This wasn't just about one slap. Something rotten ran deep inside this department, and she had just found her first crack in it. She looked up at the mayor. "Sir, I'll be needing the internal affairs files for the past 6 months." Torres flinched at the words. The mayor hesitated only a second, then nodded. You'll have full access, Chief. Sarah turned back to the gathered officers. Effective immediately, no one leaves this building without my authorization. The murmur that followed was half shock, half fear. A lockdown on her first day. She straightened her jacket, the red mark on her cheek stark against her skin. Let's begin, she said. We have a lot to clean up. And as the station doors clanged shut, the same camera that had caught her humiliation blinked once more, recording the start of a reckoning that would shake the city. The heavy metal doors clanged shut, echoing down the corridor like a sentence being passed. For the first time in years, the precinct was silent. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, whispers crawling like insects through the still air. Chief Sarah Johnson stood in the center of the lobby, her posture calm but her eyes sharp, watching, measuring, remembering. Effective immediately, she said, voice firm but steady. No officer leaves until I understand what kind of department I'm leading. Her words hit harder than the lockdown itself. The sound of boots shifted nervously on the tile. Torres sat slumped near his desk, face pale, eyes darting from Sarah to the security camera above. His career was bleeding out before him, but deep inside, he knew it wasn't just about him anymore. Sarah turned toward Officer E. Parker, the only one who had met her gaze without defiance. Officer Parker, bring me all duty rosters for the last 6 months. I want to see who worked when and who didn't. Amy nodded quickly and disappeared into the records room. Sarah's eyes moved over the room. The rest of you back to your stations, business as usual until further notice. But nothing about this morning was usual. The tension was thick enough to taste. Whispers followed her as she moved, words like revenge, setup, overreaction. She ignored them all. Years in the military had taught her that discipline wasn't given, it was earned through silence, order, and proof. Minutes later, Amy returned with a stack of dusty ledgers and printed rosters. She placed them on the chief's desk with trembling hands. Chief, some of these don't match the digital entries. I checked the logs. Someone's been editing shifts. Sarah arched an eyebrow. Who had access? Amy hesitated, then whispered, Only Officer Torres and Director Hayes from Internal Affairs. The name Hayes hung in the air like a warning. Sarah had read it that morning in her briefing notes, 20 years in internal affairs, spotless record, dozens of commendations. But something about spotless records always made her suspicious. Get me Director Hayes, she said. 15 minutes later, the door opened and a sweating man in his 50s entered. His smile was polite, but his eyes restless. Chief Johnson, he began smoothly. Quite the first day, isn't it? Misunderstandings happen. I assure you, Officer Torres will be disciplined internally. No need to escalate. Sarah cut him off. Assaulting your superior officer isn't a misunderstanding, Director. Her calm tone made him falter. I'm not here for appearances, I'm here for truth. Hayes laughed lightly, a nervous sound. Truth? Chief, departments like ours survive on balance. You stand for digging too deep. You'll bury good men with the bad. You don't want that kind of blood on your hands, do you? Sarah leaned forward. What I want is a clean department. If that scares you, Director, you can take a seat and start writing your resignation. Hayes's fake smile cracked. You don't know how things work here, he hissed quietly. Then you can educate me, she replied, unblinking. Start with the false rosters. The silence stretched until Amy spoke softly from behind her monitor. Chief, look at this. She turned the screen toward them. A pattern of shifts appeared, irregular, overlapping, impossible. Torres's name repeated again and again on days he wasn't supposed to work. Sarah's voice dropped lower. Ghost shifts, fake hours. Where did the money go? Hayes's throat bobbed. Chief, let's discuss this privately. But Sarah stood tall. No, Director. We'll discuss it here, in front of everyone. Because this isn't my first corruption case, it's just the first one you can't hide. The officers nearby froze. Hayes's hands trembled slightly as he wiped invisible sweat from his forehead. Sarah turned to Amy. Pull surveillance from the last week. Start with Torres's desk. Every interaction, every visitor. Amy's fingers flew across the keyboard. The footage appeared on the monitor. Torres yelling at civilians. Torres throwing papers. Torres taking envelopes. The lobby gasped. Sarah's expression didn't change, but inside, her stomach clenched. "Pause there," she said. The camera showed a black woman, elderly, holding a cane, flinching as Torres shoved her toward the exit. Sarah's hand curled into a fist. "That's enough." She turned back to the room. "I don't care how long this has been happening or who was involved. It ends now." Hayes stepped forward, desperate. "Chief, you're making enemies you can't afford. Think about your position. Your color doesn't buy you immunity." That last word was a mistake. The room froze. Sarah's voice, when it came, was quiet but deadly. "Thank you for clarifying, Director Hayes. I'll make sure your words are included in the report." She looked around the room, every officer, every witness, every fearful face. "Lock it down further. Nobody leaves, nobody deletes anything. We start auditing every file, every payment, every case number. If I find anyone tampering, they'll answer to federal law." Then she turned toward Hayes one last time. "And you, Director, you're not going anywhere." Hayes tried to smile again, but it came out twisted. "You think you can survive this storm, Chief? You don't know what's coming." Sarah met his glare with cold resolve. "I've lived through worse storms than you, Director." Outside, thunder rolled across the city skyline, as if nature itself had decided to echo her warning. Inside, the camera's red light blinked, steady, watching, recording the beginning of the fall. By the next morning, the precinct no longer felt like a workplace. It felt like a crime scene. The coffee machines were cold, the air thick with tension, and the sound of typing came from only one place, the IT room, now transformed into Chief Sarah Johnson's command center. Dozens of monitors flickered with security feeds, shift rosters, and payroll records. Sarah stood beside Amy Parker and Marcus, the department's tech specialist, who looked more like he belonged in a data lab than a police station. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked through the files. "Chief," Marcus said quietly, "you need to see this." On the main screen appeared months of video, Torres at his desk again and again, meeting with civilians. The pattern was unmistakable, always the same people, always small business owners, and always cash-changing hands. Amy whispered, "Those are the market district vendors. He's been running extortion out of this precinct." Sarah's jaw tightened. "How far back does this go?" Marcus scrolled, eyes wide. "At least 2 years on record. But if this isn't just Torres, look here." He pointed at another folder labeled IA logs. "Director Hayes approved every one of his shift reports and the payment requests. They match the ghost hours we found yesterday." Sarah leaned in, her reflection pale in the glowing screens. So Hayes covered for him. Internal Affairs, the very unit meant to stop corruption, was helping run it. Amy bit her lip. "Chief, if that's true, then they've probably been destroying evidence for years." Sarah nodded. "Not anymore." She turned to the officers standing guard at the door. "Lock down Internal Affairs. Confiscate every hard drive, every file. Nothing leaves that office." Within minutes, footsteps thundered through the hallway. Hayes appeared again, face flushed and angry. "Chief Johnson, what do you think you're doing?" Sarah didn't even look up. "Securing evidence? Is that a problem, Director?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're making a mess of a system that works. You can't run this department like a crusade." Her eyes finally met his, cold and steady. "A system that works? For who?" He flinched but recovered quickly. "You think these officers will back you when they realize you're tearing down their own? You'll lose them." Sarah walked toward him slowly. "Then they'll have to decide who they serve, the badge or the corruption hiding behind it." For a moment, the two locked eyes like generals in a silent war. Then Amy interrupted softly, "Chief, there's more." Marcus had pulled up a series of encrypted payroll entries. Someone created fake overtime requests, hundreds of them. Over 5 years, that's at least $10 million gone. Hayes's voice shook now. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, Chief. There are people above you, people who won't let this go public." Sarah took a step closer, lowering her voice until it was barely above a whisper. "Then they can come talk to me themselves." Outside, the city thundered again, lightning flashing through the tall windows. Inside, every officer could feel something. G shifting. Fear was turning into realization, realization into anger. An older officer stepped forward hesitantly. "Chief, we didn't know. Torres and Hayes ran this place like a fortress. Anyone who spoke up got buried." Sarah looked at him with quiet understanding. "Then today, you stopped being silent." Amy's phone buzzed. She glanced down and went pale. "Chief, someone's trying to delete the security footage from the server." Sarah spun toward Marcus. "Can you stop it?" His fingers flew across the keys. "Trying. They're wiping files from inside the network, someone in the building." Hayes turned toward the exit, his voice suddenly sharp. "This is outrageous. I won't be part of this witch hunt." But before he could move, two officers blocked the doorway. Sarah's tone was icy calm. "Director Hayes, step away from the exit. You'll stay until I finish reviewing your authorizations." Hayes's jaw clenched. "You'll regret this." Sarah took a slow breath, holding his gaze. "The only thing I'll regret," she said, "is if I let this department keep preying on its own citizens." Marcus let out a sudden laugh of disbelief. "Chief, I stopped the deletion, but you'll want to see this file." He clicked it open. The video showed Hayes and Torres in the evidence room 2 nights before Sarah's arrival, counting stacks of cash wrapped with rubber bands. Hayes's voice was clear. "Keep the market scared. They pay faster when they're afraid." The room fell silent. The truth was on screen now. Ugly, undeniable, final. Sarah straightened her back and looked around at the stunned faces. "This department has been sick for years," she said quietly. "But today it starts to heal." She turned to Amy. "Bring me the city's legal counsel. We're filing charges. Both of them stay here until federal investigators arrive." Hayes tried one last time, voice trembling with rage. "You'll destroy this department." Sarah's reply was soft, but it cut deeper than any shout. "No, Director, I'll save it." The storm outside roared louder, wind hammering against the glass as if the city itself was waking up. Inside, Sarah Johnson, the woman they had called a stranger, stood surrounded by lies, fear, and evidence. And for the first time, the officers saw her not as an outsider, but as the only person brave enough to bring justice. The next sunrise found the precinct in chaos. No one dared leave. No one dared speak without glancing at the cameras blinking red from every corner. Chief Sarah Johnson hadn't gone home. She had spent the entire night combing through reports, piecing together years of deceit hidden beneath layers of paperwork and silence. By 8 a.m., she stood in the briefing room surrounded by stacks of rosters, financial records, and surveillance drives. The whiteboard behind her was filled with names, officers, vendors, payoffs, connected by red lines that looked like veins of corruption running through the department's heart. Marcus, exhausted but alert, rubbed his eyes. "Chief, this goes deeper than we thought. The same payments Torres took match fake overtime requests. Every dollar was split between him, Hayes, and 2 city officials, Councilman Richards and Deputy Mayor Kane." Amy froze. City officials? That means this wasn't just police corruption, it's an entire network. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Her mind was racing. "No system lasts 20 years without protection from above," she murmured. "We're not cleaning a precinct. We're dismantling an empire." At that moment, a soft knock came at the door. Everyone turned as William, the elderly janitor, stepped in holding a worn brown envelope. His uniform was faded, his hands rough from years of work, but his eyes were sharp. "Chief," he said quietly, "I know what's happening, and I think I have something you'll want." Amy moved to stop him, protocol, but Sarah raised a hand. "Let him speak." William placed the envelope on the table. "I've been here 15 years. I clean up when everyone's gone. I hear things, I see things, and sometimes—" He hesitated, then looked directly at Sarah. "Sometimes I keep things." Marcus opened the envelope. Inside were several USB drives, each labeled with dates going back nearly a decade. "What are these?" "Security backups," William said simply. "I made copies before they could delete them. I didn't trust what I saw." Sarah's breath caught. "You saved evidence?" He nodded. "They thought the cameras only saved for 30 days, but I rerouted a few to an old maintenance server. Nobody checks what the janitor touches. Marcus plugged one drive into his laptop. The first video appeared on screen. Torres and Hayes meeting with Councilman Richards in a dark office. Stacks of envelopes covered the desk. The conversation was clear. Hayes's voice. Market district's been quiet. Fear works better than law. Richards replied, as long as the payments keep coming, your department's safe. Amy covered her mouth. They were running extortion like a business. Sarah's voice was low, steady. Not where are, and it ends today. She turned to William. Why didn't you come forward sooner? He gave a sad smile. Because no one listens to janitors, Chief. We're invisible until someone needs a mop. That hit harder than any confession. Sarah's eyes softened. Not anymore, William. You just gave this department its conscience back. But before she could continue, Marcus's screen flashed an alert. Chief, someone's trying to access the network remotely. It's coming from Hayes's office. Sarah's calm vanished. Seal that office, now. Officers ran down the hall. The sound of slamming doors echoed through the building. Moments later, they returned, dragging Hayes by the arms, his phone still in his hand. He struggled, shouting, You don't understand. You're playing with fire. Sarah faced him, then let it burn. She gestured to Marcus. Project the footage. The room lights dimmed, and the large monitor on the wall came alive, showing Hayes's meeting with the councilman, the threats, the cash. Gasps filled the room. Even the hardest officers looked sick. Hayes's voice cracked. You can't use that. It's illegal surveillance. Sarah stepped closer, her face cold and unwavering. You lost the right to speak of law the day you broke it. Hayes tried one last card. The city will bury you for this. Maybe, Sarah said softly, but at least I'll fall on the side of justice. Amy whispered from the corner, Chief, there's one more file on this drive. It's labeled Program Alpha. Marcus opened it. A document appeared showing signatures from senior officials approving something called Market Stability Initiative. Under it, objective, maintain control of minority vendors through regulation and enforcement pressure. The words hung like poison in the air. Sarah's hand trembled, but her voice stayed firm. This wasn't corruption, it was systemic racism written into policy. The officers around her looked broken. The silence was unbearable until William spoke again, his tone steady and sad. Now you understand, Chief. This building's been bleeding for years. You just turned on the lights. Sarah exhaled slowly. Then it's time to clean house. She turned toward Amy. Prepare a public statement. Send everything to the mayor's office and the federal investigators. The public deserves to know. Outside, the morning sun broke through the storm clouds, spilling light across the cracked windows. Inside, Hayes hung his head as if realizing his empire had finally collapsed. For the first time in 20 years, the precinct wasn't ruled by fear, but by truth. And yet deep down, Sarah knew it wasn't over, because men like Richards didn't surrender easily. As the lights flickered, the janitor's words echoed in her mind. They thought no one was watching. But now the whole world would. The storm. Outside had passed, but inside the precinct, the tension was still thick as fog. The truth was out, but exposing corruption was one thing. Surviving the backlash was another. Chief Sarah Johnson stood at the center of it all, surrounded by officers whose loyalty now shifted from fear to faith. It was 10 a.m. when the mayor's car pulled up outside. The news had already reached City Hall, and the entire department waited for what would happen next. Cameras blinked from every corner, reporters gathered at the gates, and the once mighty Director Hayes sat in a holding room, head buried in his hands. Sarah didn't look nervous. She stood by the evidence table, USB drives, ledgers, cash envelopes, and signed policies that had turned justice into a business. Every item represented a voice that had been silenced. Every document was a confession in paper form. The door opened. Mayor Richardson entered, his expression unreadable, followed by Councilman Richards, the same man from the incriminating video. The room seemed to freeze as Sarah turned toward him. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the weight of 2 decades of corruption hung between them. Chief Johnson, the mayor began carefully, you've made serious accusations against high-ranking officials. I trust you understand the implications. Sarah's tone was calm but firm. Yes, sir. I also understand the responsibility of wearing this badge, and I have proof, every recording, every forged signature, every stolen dollar. Councilman Richards forced a smile. Chief, you've been misled. These so-called recordings were illegally obtained. You've endangered the city's reputation. Marcus stepped forward, holding up a small external drive. Actually, Councilman, these were recorded on department-issued cameras. Your cameras. The system doesn't lie. Richards' smile faltered. This is absurd. Sarah took a step closer. Her voice steady as stone. Absurd is threatening vendors to pay protection money. Absurd is turning racism into policy and calling it stability. Absurd is pretending justice only applies to the powerful. The mayor's eyes narrowed. Chief, are you certain about the evidence? Play it, Sarah said. Marcus connected the drive. The monitor filled with the grainy footage. Richards in the same office counting money with Hayes, his voice clear as day. Keep them scared. The market runs smoother that way. The mayor's face drained of color. The room went dead silent. Richards tried to recover. That was taken out of context. Sarah didn't blink. Then explain the envelopes with your signature authorizing payments to community enforcement operations, or the ghost accounts funneling funds into your private firm. The councilman's composure cracked. His voice rose, desperate. You don't understand how politics works, woman. You think this city runs on honesty? We built order out of chaos. We kept people in line. The words echoed, ugly and raw. Around the room, officers stared at him with disgust. Amy whispered, he just admitted it. Sarah's reply came cold and slow. No, Councilman, you built control out of fear and called it order. But order without justice is nothing but tyranny. The mayor finally turned to the officers. Escort Councilman Richards into custody. 2 officers stepped forward. Richards's protest turned into a shout, but it didn't matter anymore. The cameras caught everything. As he was dragged out, Hayes looked up from the holding room window, watching his last ally fall. His eyes were red and hollow. Sarah turned back to the mayor. Sir, I've already sent copies of the evidence to the state attorney and federal investigators. The people deserve to know the truth before someone tries to bury it again. The mayor sighed heavily. You've just made enemies at every level, Chief. Sarah's expression softened, but her eyes stayed determined. Maybe, but at least I can face myself in the mirror. Amy handed Sarah her phone. Chief, the press wants a statement. Sarah nodded slowly. Then let's give them one. Moments later, she stood outside the precinct, the morning light cutting through the gray sky. Cameras pointed at her from every direction. She could see fear, hope, and disbelief in the crowd's faces. People who had learned to stop expecting justice. She took a deep breath. For too long, she began, voice firm but emotional. This department forgot what the badge stands for. We became enforcers of fear instead of protectors of peace. But that ends today. The crowd stirred. Microphones pushed forward. Sarah continued, her voice rising. Every officer, every citizen, every human being deserves respect and fairness, no matter their color, their job, or their background. Justice is not selective. It is not for sale. And if anyone inside this system thinks otherwise, they will answer for it. Applause broke out. Some officers stepped beside her. Amy, Marcus, even the older veterans who had once looked away. For the first time, unity replaced silence. Inside, Hayes watched from behind the glass. The same station that had once feared him now stood against everything he represented. His hand trembled as he whispered, "It's over." But Sarah knew it wasn't truly over yet. Corruption didn't vanish overnight, it resurfaced in shadows. Still, for the first time, light had pierced through. As the press conference ended, William, the janitor, walked past her quietly. He smiled faintly. "You did it, Chief. You made them see." Sarah looked at him with warmth. "No, William. We did." The wind picked up, carrying the echo of her words through the courtyard. Above the precinct, the flag rippled in the sunlight, not as a symbol of power, but of renewal. For years, the truth had been buried under lies, money, and hate. Now it stood tall, alive, undeniable, unstoppable. And Sarah Johnson, the woman they had tried to humiliate, had become the name that restored honor to the badge. 3 weeks later, the city that once turned a blind eye to injustice could no longer ignore the truth. The headlines were everywhere. Corruption exposed inside police force. Chief Johnson leads historic cleanup. And councilman, director arrested in racial extortion scandal. The world finally knew what had been happening behind those station walls. Inside the precinct, the air felt lighter. The tension that had once haunted every corner had been replaced by something different, quiet respect. Officers now greeted each other with sincerity instead of fear. Desks that once hid secret envelopes now held open case files. For the first time in decades, the department was breathing again. Sarah Johnson stood by her office window, watching the morning sun rise over the city skyline. The glass still bore faint cracks from the riot years before, scars that reminded her how easily systems break when people stop standing for what's right. Amy knocked softly on the door. "Chief, they're ready for the press briefing." Sarah turned, smiling faintly. "Let's make this the last one for a while." They walked together through the hall. Officers nodded respectfully as she passed. The same halls that had echoed with prejudice and arrogance now carried quiet pride. Marcus stood near the IT room reviewing final reports for the federal inquiry. "Chief, the FBI confirmed. They're charging Hayes, Torres, and Councilman Richards with racketeering, bribery, and civil rights violations." Sarah's eyes softened. "Good. And the victims?" Amy replied. "They've started receiving restitution. Vendors from the market district are rebuilding their shops. Some even sent thank you letters." Sarah nodded. Then maybe it was worth it. As she entered the press room, cameras flashed. Reporters stood ready, but this time there was no hostility, only respect. She adjusted the microphone, her voice calm and steady. 3 weeks ago, she began, his department stood on the edge of collapse. It wasn't because of bad policing, but it was because of bad people who forgot why we serve. Today that ends. Today, we begin again." Her words were quiet but carried weight. For years, citizens were made to feel afraid of those sworn to protect them. "I can't erase that pain, but I can promise one thing. This badge will never again be a weapon. It will be a promise of justice." The crowd erupted into applause. Flashbulbs burst like stars, and behind her, Amy, Marcus, and several officers stood tall, a united wall of integrity. When the briefing ended, Sarah walked outside. The sky was bright, the air clean after the morning rain. Across the street, a small group of vendors from the market district waited, holding handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Chief Johnson." One elderly woman stepped forward, the same woman from the footage, the one Torres had shoved. Her eyes shimmered with tears as she whispered, "You gave us our dignity back." Sarah smiled gently and shook her hand. "No, ma'am. You always had it. They just couldn't see it." Later that afternoon, she visited the holding facility where Hayes awaited trial. The guards opened the door and she stepped inside. Hayes looked older now, broken, defeated. His once slick hair was uncombed, his confidence gone. He tried to smile. "Come to gloat, Chief?" Sarah shook her head. "No, I came to understand." "Understand what?" he scoffed. "How someone who swore to uphold the law could destroy it for profit." Hayes stared at the floor. "You think you fixed anything? They'll replace me, replace Richards. There's always someone ready to take the deal." Sarah's voice remained calm. "Maybe, but they'll think twice before they do it again. Fear can work both ways." Hayes said nothing. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You were right about one thing, though. Didn't know how things worked here, but now I do. And that's exactly why they'll never work that way again. When she stepped outside, the sun had dipped behind the skyline, painting the city in shades of gold. William, the janitor, was sweeping the front steps, humming softly. He looked up and grinned. "Looks like they finally cleaned the dirt from the inside, huh, Chief?" Sarah smiled. "Not all of it yet, William, but we're getting there." He chuckled. "You did something no one else dared, made the mighty kneel." She glanced back at the precinct. "I didn't make them kneel, truth did." That night, she walked through the now silent corridors of the station one last time before heading home. The lights glowed warmly instead of harshly, the air no longer heavy. The same camera that had recorded her humiliation now stood as a silent witness to justice restored. She stopped in front of it and whispered, "Keep watching." Outside, the city pulsed with new energy, cautious, hopeful, reborn. The following morning, she received a message from the mayor. "Chief Johnson, the department has regained public trust. The city council has voted to expand your reforms citywide. Congratulations." Sarah smiled faintly but didn't celebrate. Reform was never finished. It was a lifelong duty. She pinned her badge to her chest, the metal gleaming in the sunlight. When she walked through the lobby, every officer stood at attention. Even the new recruits fresh from the academy saluted with pride. Amy handed her a folder labeled New Code of Conduct. Sarah opened it, scanning the first line aloud. "Respect is not optional. It is the foundation of justice." She closed the folder and said quietly, "Now that's a policy I can stand behind." As she stepped outside into the light, the city felt different. Not perfect, not healed, but alive with possibility. The story that began with a slap had become a symbol of change. And somewhere deep inside, Sarah knew that her calm, her courage, and her refusal to bow had given a city its conscience back. The badge gleamed brighter that morning, because it was no longer just metal, it was truth, reborn in the hands of the woman they once tried to break. The end. Never judge someone by their appearance, because one day they might be the one holding you accountable.